to the Family Pulpit Podcast. This is episode 7. I don't know if we have an official title for this today, but we're going to be picking back up the subject of work.
I thought we did Plato's influence on work.
Great idea. So what we're going to be talking about today is something that I mentioned back in Notes from the Pulpit, episode 3, that little mobile version in the truck. I do get a little, you know what? When I'm mobile sometimes, I do get a little animated. I do get a little...
What, you like move your hands like this? Bzz, bzz?
No, I don't. I don't really talk with my hands. But what happens
puppets?
if you listen to that episode, you might be like, "Man, this dude sounds angry." I don't actually get angry like that, but I do get a little bit intense. Let's say.
Can I say that this is going to be a fun episode for me, especially
Really?
towards the end? Because honestly, you wouldn't think because you're like Plato, bro. You're not a philosopher. Only 80-year-old men who look at their belly buttons can be philosophers.
Go ahead.
The fun part's going to be, I love to poke compulsory government-run education.
We're not talking about that one this episode, though.
We're not.
And I'm so sorry. No, I'm going to lay this out for you in just a second. Hey, real quick.
Okay, wait. I do want to mention that phone over there, your phone, his phone. I don't know who I'm talking to.
Like one person.
We held it probably up to the microphone, and it gave static, bro.
Just real quick.
It was like... Also, Stella's in here.
It's okay. I don't see her. Hey, real quick, since this episode is going to be talking about Play-Doh, what's your favorite color of Play-Doh?
Probably the human one.
The human color of Play-Doh?
Yeah.
What like peach?
Yeah.
But you like the attachments that make food.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
They're so fun. Like, everybody's like, it's for kids. And I'm like...
Quick question, though. When was the last time you played with Play-Doh?
All mine is dried out. Like, Play-Doh... Okay. I'm requesting an invention.
Yeah.
Somebody, if nobody watches this video, it'll have to be me. We need to make a Play-Doh restorance device. Because Play-Doh goes stale.
Will water work?
God did it.
So, we're not actually going to be talking about Play-Doh.
Who says we're not? Who says this isn't one of those family playtime videos? Yay! Today we're going to be talking about Play-Doh. Yay!
We actually are going to be talking about Play-Toe. So what we've got here is... Not your big toe. Focus for me. So what we're actually going to be talking about is what I was talking about from episode 3 of Notes from the Pulpit, which I was a little bit intense. But what I did in that... And I was just shooting from the hip, by the way. You know what? When I say stuff like that, I just told you yesterday or the day before that when I say I'm shooting from the hip, I feel like it's prideful. Right? Because I feel like I'm like, oh yeah, look what's in my head. I didn't actually have any notes. I apologize for that. But I actually didn't have any notes. And what I came up with on that little drive were 4 main influences on the definition and meaning of work. And they are in order of kind of how they came about in history. The Platonic influence on what is known today as the institutional church. And then the second one is the Industrial Revolutions, I should say, 1 through 4. So we have 1 through 3 that have occurred over history, and then we have the 4th Industrial Revolution that we're in right now, probably started around 2010 or so. Then we have the third main influence on the definition and meaning of work is compulsory government-run education. And then that's basically mandatory schooling. And then the 4th one is feminism. So there's the 4 main influences on the definition and meaning of work.
I absolutely love to poke education and feminism, especially feminism.
So what I think we're going to do, so I know you're excited about poking holes in those last 2, but what I think we're going to do is devote an episode to each one of these because they're big, broad topics. And the reason why we're doing this is because in episode 1 through 4, we were kind of laying that foundation of creation, image of God, and man's purpose as dignity given to him as being created in the Imago Dei of work worship, right? Mm-hmm. Right, you with me? And then that kind of led into our episode 6 discussion on AI. And so here's why all of this ties together and why all of this is important. Because with the rise of AI, what is planned to happen is a redefinition of work.
Yeah.
And so since they want to kind of change the definition and meaning of work, and this has happened throughout history, with the Industrial Revolutions too, by the way, work has changed. The concept of work has changed. But what we want to do is we want to get an undergirding, a historical undergirding, that means a foundation of...
Underwear.
If you'd like, maybe, a foundation of how work has changed since God instituted it in the garden. Okay, The reason is because what happens is we are guilty today of embracing what Martin Lloyd-Jones calls the inherited position. And what that means is that without asking any questions at all, we simply go along with the status quo and embrace the position that we've inherited. And how that relates is it relates to not only work, but sometimes it relates to our particular theological position. So perhaps if our parents were Presbyterian or Anglican or Baptist, then we grow up thinking that same thing without critically evaluating it in light of Scripture. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So we embrace the inherited position. So what I'm trying to do with you, not just in this episode, but overall, I want you to think. I want you to use God's word and think. Kind of think not just for yourself, but I want you to think in light of Scripture or influenced by Scripture. You follow? So, yes. With all that introduction underway, I'm going to let you talk in just a second. Let me just lay it out for us. Go ahead. What was it?
I wanted to say, I do get prideful too, because the other day I said, hey, Dad, I want to ask ChatGPT to compare the evolution of quantum computers, supercomputers, and everyday computers over time.
I see. And so you thought that was a prideful question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it. We've got to watch that. Each one of us can fall into different traps of pride. So anyway, in this episode, we're going to do our best to cover the Platonic influence. And so in order to do that, we've got to ask ourselves, who is Plato? You read a little bit about him because I gave you
Consequence of Ideas.
Yeah, the chapter from R.C. Sproul's book, The Consequence of Ideas, which if you guys don't know, you're going to say something about it?
How can I recommend it? Because I haven't read it, but I do think it's a pretty good book on Christian view of philosophy, which you can't get a lot of those. Also, another popular philosophy book is A History of Western Philosophy.
Yes, written by Bertrand Russell. But
I think his name should be Russell Wilson, because I just know the Russell in the name, and I know one other Russell in football, so shout out to Russell Wilson.
Okay. He's a bit of a liberal, so everybody has an angle that they're writing at, so they're coming from a background of their beliefs, etc.
He should throw a party with Luke Skywalker.
Maybe so. That goes back to episode 1, if you're not familiar, where we did a little shout out to Luke Skywalker and asked whether he was a liberal or not. That was our first
unsubscribed celebrity.
That was our first unsubscribed celebrity.
Yeah,
and perhaps our first, at least based on our analytics, quote, viral short.
Yes, it's always viral. My first viral video was like 163 views.
I mean, on your channel or this
channel? my channel.
Okay. Anyway, back to Plato. So Plato was just for everyone's awareness. I mean, I know people are probably familiar with the name Plato.
Yes.
He was an ancient Greek philosopher. So he lives from approximately 427 to 347
80
BC. That goofy BCE. Don't follow the BCE stuff. That's confusing. I'm trying to take Christ out of it. But 427
Wait, why'd you put BCE?
I did not copy this from something that was written elsewhere. Anyway,
we're gonna have to delete that.
Well, I mean, you can delete it. It's not a huge deal for us right here in this. He was a student also of Socrates. So if you're thinking Greek philosophy around this time, 400 or 500 years before the birth of Christ, you've got Socrates, and then you have Plato, and then you have Aristotle. And so Socrates is essentially a teacher of Plato, and Plato is essentially a teacher of Aristotle. And all three of these are extremely influential throughout the history of Western civilization. Western civilization, do you know what that includes, like Western Civ?
I don't know, but like Western Civ is mentioned in Percy Jackson.
It used to
be
a joke.
Western philosophy.
So it used to be a joke, like in 90s sitcoms or something. It would be a joke about taking a Western Civ course. Like, what class do you have next? Oh, I've got Western Civ. Like, I don't even know that they teach Western civilization anymore. But it's basically would be the United States, lots of Europe, like as far as England.
Like Western culture.
Western culture, yeah.
That's basic.
Yeah, and then in contrast to the East, which would take you over to the Far East, like Asian type cultures, but may also include parts of Russia as well. And I think the heart behind those kind of go back to church history, to this East-West split in the Roman Empire. But
speaking of Russia, I found out that the original Skibbity Toilet video came from a Russian chant.
Okay, so if you are keeping track at home and you want to count and keep track of the random thoughts that the co-host has, that would be number 1.
No, that'd be like number...
Today in this episode?
Googleplex. Number Googleplex.
No. Okay.
Googleplex and 2.
So Plato goes on to found an academy. He's got some writings that he's got. I think one of the most popular books that he's written is called The Republic.
Speaking of writings, Plato's I do want to write a works of Ezra Ferguson. And also
at age 10, what works have you possibly acquired?
Well, I thought about writing about a study because I've always been fascinated by technology from the 50s to the early 80s, late 80s, and to the late 70s. From the early 50s to the late 60s and 70s.
Well, that's weird. We just lost that monitor for some reason. Don't know why. It's all right. We're still rolling. Okay. So the key thing for us to keep in mind with Plato. Oh, you're going to have to watch hitting on that desk. They're going to hear that. Don't touchy. That's enough.
We can cut this out.
We're not cutting. We're rolling. The key thing for us to remember and keep in mind with Plato is his sacred versus secular divide. So Plato's two realms. Let me just state this clearly, and then we'll go back into our discussion here. Okay? Plato's two realms of thinking. This is the material versus immaterial. So that would be what we physically are, what we physically do, like as far as our body goes, versus the immaterial. And the immaterial, yes, for him would include the soul, but it also includes the mind, like the thinking, the meditation, the contemplation, all of those things. Okay, so Plato's two realms of thinking contributed to a split in Christian thought between the sacred, or otherwise known as spiritual pursuits, and secular, or what we might call the physical labor, what ended up shaping monasticism, which we'll talk about, and then later church culture. So in other words, because you create a division, or because Plato created a division between the physical and the spiritual, or basically the material and the immaterial, he creates a divide. Now he doesn't take it so far as Gnosticism, which we'll look at in just a second, to say that the physical is evil and the spiritual is good, but he says that the spiritual is better than the physical. So what that caused them...
Isn't that true?
No. What? No, because we're one being. So we are body and soul, right? So this is why we talked about this actually on Sunday, didn't we? This is why Christ comes and he is God's son, which was he was never created, right? He's an uncreated being. He's eternal.
From the beginning.
But he didn't have a physical body. He was spirit. And then he comes and he inhabits what? Human flesh, right? So the Gnostics want to say, hey, Jesus is flesh. That's an evil thing. So they wanted to create that division. That it actually doesn't exist. Jesus takes on human flesh. And what he goes to show us is that while we were born sinners in Adam, Christ essentially redeems the flesh by being born in the flesh and living a holy, sinless life. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. And so this is why we can look forward to that day when our bodies, that is this physical being here, will be glorified. The reason is because Christ, God himself, who created man in his own image, created us as physical beings, right? So that when Jesus returns and we're in his kingdom, our bodies are glorified. Our spirits have been redeemed. Our souls, I should say, have been redeemed, and our bodies have been glorified.
Did you know that you're speaking with your hands and nobody can see us?
I'm doing that for your benefit because you are extremely distracted playing with your headphone cord.
Also, hey guys. Now who's talking about the Watchers?
Okay. So we got Plato's view of the soul. He believes in the immortality and primacy of the soul, and that influenced early church theology. Okay, so this is kind of the basis for those who are listening. If you're familiar with the dualism that I just mentioned, where the soul is over the body, it affects doctrines of salvation, resurrection, and spirituality. Questions or yes?
I've got a assignment for people who are taking this course. This little playlist. Homework that you need to do is listen to the song "Immortal" by Fall Out Boys.
What?
To learn more about immortality that you were just talking about.
I actually don't even know that song, but there's random.
It's from Big Hero 6.
Thought number 2.
Mirror thought number Googleplex 2. You mean?
So there is some influence, and we're going to look at each one of these time periods that Plato had influence upon. But just as a general thought, he does have an influence on Augustine, and that kind of comes from what we'll look at here in a minute, Platonism or Neoplatonic thought, and that's kind of revival of Platonic thought that happened in about the 3rd century AD. And so if you read Augustine's City of God, it's going to draw heavily on Platonic categories. It's going to affect it's kind of his thought process, which would make sense because he's coming out of that Greco-Roman background. It impacts Western culture beyond the church. Plato's emphasis on reason, ideal forms, the pursuit of truth. It shapes education, politics, philosophy. We could probably make an argument that it really impacts everything, laying the groundwork for medieval scholasticism, which I don't think we'll talk about in this episode, maybe. But anyway, extremely influential. You cannot read a book today that hasn't been in some way shaped or formed by Platonic thought. It's just the environment into which we've grown up into or been born into, really. So let's look at each one of these. You take a look at this as well. The Platonic influence on work. This is where the rubber is going to meet the road in this episode. Okay, this is pre-Greco-Roman time period. Let me just introduce this for us. But dude, you're way out there. Pull yourself back in for just a second. I need you here. Okay, I know this is like, oh dude, this is a class. It is. I know. But we got to walk through this.
I thought we were going to be talking about being able to poke education and feminism.
We have to go through each 4 of these. So, how work was prior to Plato, prior to this Greco-Roman time period. So by that I mean when Greece became an empire, and then how Rome essentially embraced the Greek culture when their empire took shape. Mm-hmm. That was called Hellenism.
For context, do your homework again and listen to Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears to learn more.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Songs rule the world.
Prior to the Greco-Roman Empire, you got Mesopotamia, and you have Egypt, and then you have Jewish ideals of work. And so Mesopotamia, this is basically the Fertile Crescent that we all grew up learning about, where civilization began. You've got kind of labor that's viewed as a duty of humanity to serve gods. Have you read anything about this time period at all? I know we're going to be doing history. Mesopotamia, so we're probably talking like 4,000 BC.
Mesopotamia was like... Awkward pause. Was like a desert.
Yeah.
Like a Badlands.
I think that's probably a common thought, but really it encompasses what's called the Fertile Crescent because it was where the Garden of Eden originally was.
Yeah.
And so because of the Nile, the rivers that have influenced there, Tigris and Euphrates, I mean to say, not the Nile, Tigris and Euphrates.
Are we calling that we're halfway in because we're not going to be?
I'm not calling anything. What are you doing?
Because we always say, like, we're about halfway in.
You do that. You do it. I'm not worried about it.
I'm saying we're about halfway in right now.
You could be wrong.
I could be.
I'm not going to look.
I might not be.
So, because labor was viewed as it was dignified, we might say. The labor had to do with temple work, irrigation, farming, etc. You had some class distinction between ruling and priestly class that avoided manual labor.
Yeah.
When we get to Egypt, you have heard a little bit about Egypt. What do you know about Egypt? Give me a reference to how you know about Egypt. What do you got?
Oh gosh, many things. I've read about random things everywhere. Egypt, really early physics in ancient Egypt. They worked out measuring. They had the original cubit stick, I believe. It was like a piece of stone porcelain, and it was polished and it had hieroglyphs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
I've learned about them from watching the Moses thing.
Okay,
King of Egypt.
Okay, what brings Egypt into view in Scripture?
Oh, definitely. First mention was Exodus.
Okay.
And they did go to they did get first
Exodus
major.
For real?
But no, I remember in Genesis they had the passage with Abraham and Sarai with the Pharaoh king. Wasn't that Egypt?
I don't know if we quite got there yet, but what about Joseph? Joseph gets to Egypt, right? And then there was a famine. So that's how Israel ended up in Egypt. So their view of work was linked to what's called a cosmic order. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because really these other civilizations, they drew heavily on what we later learned from Scripture. And the reason is because God had given an oral revelation of himself to the first man and woman and then generations down before Moses in Scripture, the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
In context, to learn more about Scripture, listen to every one of Forrest Frank's songs.
What? I don't even know what you were doing.
I'm just song quoting. It's fun.
So you've got some big projects that happened during Egypt's reign. This is where the pyramids came from. State power and religious obligation defined work. whoa. Then you get to...
For context, listen to Everybody's Working for the Weekday.
Would you stop? That's not context. Those are songs that go along with this.
Exactly. That's the point, bro.
By the time you get to around, I think, the 1500 BC time period or so, when Moses was alive and God had him write down everything that he had told him to write down, including Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
You said like 1500,
it's okay.
And I was like, oh crap, we're coming on 1492.
I don't know.
But you said 1500 and it made me think 1580. But
no,
you
I'm
meant
not quite
BC.
there yet. We're gonna walk through these periods quickly, but I just want to give an overview of how Plato, what happened before him, how work was viewed before him, before we get into each one of these little separate time periods. Okay, so Jewish labor. I actually learned a lot about Jewish labor while I was getting prepared for this episode over the last week or two, because we've had a lot of things going on, so I haven't been able to do an episode. But work was deeply rooted in creation theology, right? So this actually goes back to exactly what we were talking about from Genesis in episodes 3 and 4. Work was tied to creation, tied to Imago Dei, work worship principle. They viewed labor wasn't inherently a curse, but part of humanity's vocation to cultivate and steward the earth. Then after the fall, you've got futility and frustration, just like we talked about.
Yes.
One thing that let me see if I can remember how this happened, but during the time period of Jesus, and maybe we'll see this a little bit more clearly in just a second, but during that time period, rabbis, Pharisees, probably some of the other religious groupings, they all prized and dignified manual labor.
For context, listen to I'm Losing My Religion.
Man, I'm going to tell you what, that's the last thing for context you're doing. Quit it. Okay, this brings us up to the first major time period, and that's the rise of Neoplatonism under a man by the name of Plotinus. So that's 204 to 270. Neoplatonism is kind of a spiritualized form of Platonism. That's the one that mostly influenced Augustine, huh?
Modern version of Platonism.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's what neo means.
All right, so
that's what you just told me. Never knew what neo meant.
Look at this. Look on the screen there at that little outline for Greco-Roman Empire. Look at the green box. What do you got? What's it say?
View of work, which is leisure and contemplation prized.
Contemplation. Yeah.
That's what I said.
Go ahead.
Manual labor relegated.
Mm-hmm. Relegated. That means it's handed down to.
Relegated. Oh. Well,
to who?
Why didn't you write handed down to?
Just
kidding. Relegated to slaves.
So what do you think that means?
Means that people didn't just stare at their belly buttons, they were meditating, and relegated to slaves meant that the slaves did all the work for them.
Yeah.
Like people have, it's kind of like what would be the modern?
Well, we'll get to this in just a second. It's all of the what's called blue collar jobs.
Yeah.
So the physical labor is looked down upon.
Jobs. People who are blue collar don't have to be dumb. I met a really smart guy at Walmart today who had a blue collar job.
Listen, this is exactly what episode 3 from Notes from the Pulpit was about. This is what our culture does. They inherently look down on blue collar jobs as those people are stupid, and then white collar, meaning those people who don't get their hands dirty and they've had some sort of education. Those are the enlightened individuals, and I'm telling you right now that comes from this Platonic influence on work. Okay. The second thing is that in the Greek-Roman Empire, they had a mental versus physical work. They had a division there. Okay, this lays the groundwork for separating dignity from manual labor.
That was Platonic influence, by the way.
Which is what you just talked about.
Yeah.
The blue collar, this is the groundwork right here. Right here. Physical labor is considered inferior. Only the slaves do that stuff. We, who are so wise and enlightened, we like to sit around and we like to think about philosophy. And we like to think about wisdom, which is where philosophy is based from. The word wisdom in Greek is Sophia, so you can hear philosophy in there. Philosophy.
I want to mention something briefly before we get into our third point on Greco-Roman Empire. I forgot to say I wanted to write a book other than my Ezra's works. I wanted to write a book about everything, and I wanted it to cover everything, starting with theology, ending with theology.
You're going to write a book about everything. Mm-hmm. For those who are listening, for the 1.25 people that are listening to this, if you could
one of them must be a cyborg.
maybe. If you can make a comment into our YouTube channel on this and hold him accountable for writing a book, one single book, or volumes on everything, by the way, on everything.
I'll try to keep it one single book, but like I'm going to
one book on everything.
Touch into the main things of everything.
So one thing that I wanted to point out is that when you go back and read about Greco-Roman time period and you read about Plato's influence on work, you'll come across the word leisure quite a bit. And what they mean is not what we mean by leisure today. So they're not taking off, like, hey, for extended context, everybody's working for the weekend. That's not what they said. I know that's not what they mean by leisure. They don't mean like we're taking the weekend off or we're taking a day off to play golf. Leisure for them is the same word where we get our English word for school. So what that means is they're going to think. They want to sit around and think, and they want to learn, and they want to discuss, and they want to meditate and contemplate on these things. That's leisure.
So if they earned leisure on the weekends, basically, instead of saying, you guys just won yourself an awesome weekend, they basically said, the right to study at any school... You have earned it.
Right, from the commercial. Thank you for that. I knew that was coming.
Commercial.
This, by the way, reminds me. So this Greco-Roman influence where they wanted to sit around and think and learn, the Jews did not neglect that, the Jewish people. And so that I'm talking about Old Testament Judaism leading into first century Judaism. When they picked up a trade, which is what the Pharisees, the rabbis, etc., they all had some sort of trade that they passed along to their son. And they said, I'll have quotes here in a minute, I believe, but they said if you didn't pass along these trades to your son, you're basically like a Gentile, like a pagan.
Aristotle only lived to be 62.
We haven't gotten quite to Aristotle yet. We're trying to move through this quickly, but you're right. He did only live to be 62. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make with the Jews is that they balance the physical and the mental exercises. They might go out and they might work in their trade. They might work in the fields for a few hours, and then they'll come back in and give themselves over to the mental exercises.
Would you like me to make you feel bad?
So the mental will recharge the physical, and the physical will recharge the mental. Both of those work hand in hand. Can you please give me an example of how that works for you? The mental and the physical.
Well, on my school schedule, I have my math, my English,
I'm thinking in
science.
terms of, hey, I'm getting frustrated mentally because I'm working on this, which is what you call floppy. We talked about that all the way back in episode 1, I believe.
Did we really?
And then how does the physical help you? By physical, I mean getting outside. What happens?
Go out and shoot some basketball and then come back in, and then I'm like, and I just fix everything.
So it causes you to get your focus back when you balance these things, which I think needs to be done more in schooling, and I think it needs to be done more in work.
Also, I want to mention real quick, I can instantly make you feel bad by saying you're only 14 years away from Aristotle.
That doesn't make me feel bad at all.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Well, you're always like, I'm old.
I am not always doing that. I just outran you yesterday. In fact, I dusted you.
Yeah, I wasn't. That's not my peak, bro.
Listen, I said let's race because I was feeling it, and I knew it was over before it began.
I know, but I just wasn't feeling it. And it was uphill anyway, and I'm better on solid ground.
Were we running the same uphill path?
Yes.
So does your excuse hold water?
Yes.
No.
Because it just wasn't a good day for me.
That's what people who make excuses say.
I'd been sitting around all day, bro.
Who was sitting beside you? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Walked all the way back to the house, so no, you weren't sitting up.
All right. So that kind of covers our Greco-Roman time period, and for that, we're really looking at this is a broad time period, about 900 years, well, basically 1,000 years, 332 BC to 642 AD, roughly speaking. That's for peak Greek Empire and peak Roman Empire, and
context,
that was their view of work.
Listen to 1,000 years.
Okay, you're going to need to listen to me. I'm going to edit you out of this podcast if you don't quit doing that.
No, you can't, because I've been talking over you the whole time.
I will have beeps. You have been talking over me the whole time. What is wrong with you?
You know what I'll do?
No.
During the entire time where you start talking from now on, I just go ooh in the background. So if you bleep me out, you bleep you out. Ooh.
Quit. Bro, I'm serious. You are full of it today. So our second time period that we got, this is our New Testament Christianity time period into what's called late antiquity. So we're going to run this from
antiquity. Doesn't there something Josephus related that says antiquity? Antiquities of the Jews.
Antiquities of the
Jews.
Exactly right.
The first one's Wars of the Jews. The second one might be Antiquities of the Jews.
So let's run this New Testament time period up to late antiquity. We're talking about like late 3rd century into 7th, 8th century here, roughly speaking. We're coming out of and we're overlapping with our Greco-Roman time period. But in the New Testament, if you read the New Testament especially, and you read the works of Paul, the letters of Paul wrote, you are going to find that Paul is upholding the dignity of labor. Do you know what trade Paul did? What trade Paul had?
Don't tell me. He was an electrician.
No. Surprisingly enough, electricity had not been invented in the first century AD.
Electricity wasn't invented.
Gee whiz. It hadn't been discovered yet. Sorry. So
everybody says electricity hasn't been invented.
I'm sorry. Paul was a tent maker, so Paul worked with his hands. Do you know what trade Jesus worked?
Carpenter.
Okay. All right. So all work is dignified, and Paul's actually saying...
That was an example or precept, as we just watched in the movie, about how work was dignified. He was like, all right, let me work for you to show you, because I am the greatest being in the world.
Who?
Jesus.
It was in what?
He was a carpenter, and it was an example to show everybody that work was dignified.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
He was like, I am God, and if God works,
I wasn't quite following you there. Okay.
What, did you think I was saying that about myself?
No, I was trying to figure out where you were going with this, but yes. So Jesus actually has a quote that he talks about God working. So he says that God is working. So for those of you who think that when God rested on the 7th day back in creation, he hasn't been doing anything yet, Jesus in John's gospel actually says that my Father is working from then until now, from creation until now, still working. So what was he working on?
He's working on... He stopped working on the creation.
He's working on his sovereign plan and his providence over all creation, including his redemption of mankind. And that was the work that Jesus came to do as well. So Jesus is working not only spiritual work, which, by the way, in the New Testament, we talked about this a little bit in episode 4, so we won't hit on this a lot, but in the New Testament, when Paul's holding up the dignity of manual labor, there's also the concept of work as being spiritual work, like sharing the gospel. So both of those things need to be held together.
For context, read Work by Jane Austen. It doesn't have anything to do with work, but it's just called that, so read it.
Did you read it?
No.
Are you recommending books that you haven't read?
Yes, I recommended Consequence of Ideas. I said I haven't read this, but I recommend it.
You have completely lost focus. Anyway, in the New Testament, you're going to see a unity of body and soul, a unity of physical material. You're going to see them countering these Platonic ideas, which run to their fullest logical conclusion equals Gnosticism.
Do you know what's
so we
funny?
don't have time to go through all those verses today. But if you read the Gospel of John, if you read the letter of 1 John, you will see specifically dealing with the heresy of Gnosticism that views the physical as evil and the spiritual as good. So this is why it says that Jesus came in the flesh. That entire language there, the Logos becoming flesh, was attacking the idea of Gnosticism, which springs out of Platonism.
I do want to mention, isn't it funny that all three of the quotations he made were of each of the John Gospels, or each of the John books? John, 1 John, and 2 John?
Well, if you hang on, I'll mention Calvin and Owen as well.
The big ones.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So the next time period we get to is kind of on the heels of this New Testament and late antiquity. And by the way, you're going to see those are early church fathers like Origen. They're shaped by Platonism. John Chrysostom, Augustine, like we already talked about. A lot of their writings you got to, I'm not saying that you have to avoid. No, you should read them. You should. They say some good things.
Who,
but
Thomas Aquinas?
Aquinas. That's later though. Hang on for Aquinas. That's the next period. Okay. But what I'm talking about these early church fathers is not that you have to be careful, but there is something that's widely known as a cliff phenomenon. And so what that means is coming out of the New Testament, where you have the apostles who are writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit,
divine,
and then you get into these early church fathers that kind of take over the mantle, sorta. There's a cliff phenomenon. What that means is that they're still trying to figure out how all of this doctrine plays out. And remember that they're not going to quite have an assembled New Testament just yet. So there is this cliff phenomenon that takes place until Scripture kind of gets assembled. We won't talk about it in this episode. Please don't think that it was assembled at a council. It wasn't. It was already widely accepted what books were divinely inspired. Did you have a question?
No. I was going to mention something, but I changed my mind.
Okay, that's fine. But anyway, the next time period is the medieval and monastic time period.
But something I do want to mention is the very first attempt at a full podcast. I said, yeah, so we're going to be talking about this. We got Darwinism and Neo-Darwinism, and I don't know what either of those things are.
Okay, do you know now?
No.
What? Even after we did an episode on Darwinism, you don't know?
I'll have to go back and see.
Well, who was Darwin?
Well, I know who Darwin was, and I know all about that stuff, but I just don't know if that's Darwinism or not.
Darwinism is essentially belief of evolution. That
What's Neo? Oh,
Neo just means
what
new.
The adapted version.
We just talked about that.
I forgot, my whole world changed. Neo basically just meant something about related to Pokemon.
Neo meaning new.
Yeah, because there's like a bunch of Neo-related things in Pokemon.
They use that word a lot, and I didn't know what that was either, really. They use like neo-conservative or neo-liberal.
Neo-dookie.
What's that mean?
Fresh dookie.
Is that... Bro, I just tell you what. There is not enough edits that are going to take place in this podcast.
You just said that we weren't cutting. We were just rolling.
The medieval and monastic time period. So that kind of coincides with Rome's fall. This is where you've got the kind of what rises up known as guilds and crafts. So you've got a lot of vocation that's tied to honor. A lot of work is tied to vocation, honor, community regulation. So we've got, in this medieval monastic time period, this is where you've got the rise of guilds and crafts. I don't think this means like crafts like what you would make like Craft Corner or something like that, where you're making stuff out of clay. What other crafts do you like to do, by the way?
I used to do paper and cardboard.
Oh yeah, you were very good. Remember when you learned origami? Mm-hmm. You got really good at that really quickly. But you're also a master with cardboard.
Oh yeah.
But
I built literally an Iron Man glove.
Yes, now that was impressive. What were the other things?
Arc reactor. I don't know where that is. That was my greatest creation of all time, and I lost it.
So here they're not really talking about crafts like that. Be careful with your foot on there. But they're not really talking about crafts essentially like that. They're talking about things that you would make with your hands. So if you were to be a wood carver.
I thought that's what we were talking about. I make cardboard with my hands.
It is sort of like that. Yes, it's maybe a more advanced version, maybe like things that they can make and sell.
I built
things that they can sell. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Chair. Haven't picked it up for a while. We'll have to finish that chair. Random comment number 8.
Which is what? Building a chair?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the monastic time period, or what is sometimes called a monastery?
A monastery, yes. It's where monks live.
Yeah. So during this medieval and monastic time period, this is where you get monks arrive. Do you know what they did? Do you know the whole reason behind that? Like a monk.
Monk should die.
What did a monk do? Do you know? So
they kind of were Catholic. That's what they were.
Yeah,
and they shaved their heads, and they had the door where if they were too fat to get in, then they had to starve until they were thin enough to go in.
What was that from? I remember reading that somewhere.
It was on Facebook.
Where was it? No, I've read that before. That might be a kind of a fairy tale, but I have read that before.
Super cool, but it didn't matter how much food I ate, I would still be able to get through. Yeah. Why wouldn't they just waddle inside?
I don't know. I can't remember what that was. That was some sort of, I almost feel like it was some sort of punishment that they took upon themselves, because a lot of times they would discipline their bodies.
I have sinned, Father.
Extensively, yes.
I've had 212 pieces of chocolate this week.
No doubt. So what they did during...
That's you.
I don't need... Do I eat candy? No.
Mom sneaks candy.
Well, that's not
from
me,
us.
Though. So let me help people understand what that happened in the monasteries with the monks.
Yes.
So what the monks did as a result of this Platonic influence is they started seeing that they needed to draw themselves out of the world. So
some of them knew that they should go to wrestling instead.
No, that was Nacho Libre.
Nacho Libre. Go watch that. That's your homework again.
Do you guys see what I'm dealing with here? I mean, it's getting serious. I don't know if we just recommended Nacho Libre on this as a way to understand monasteries, but I feel like we did.
It does a lot. I mean, it's where I've learned all.
Basically, if you want to know about monasteries, just go watch Nacho Libre, and that's going to fill in the pieces for you.
And Wonka. Don't forget about Wonka. There's a little bit in Wonka. Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. I've eaten 412 of these in the past week.
Bro, you got to pull it in. So that's not so much a monastery as it is Catholicism. Church. Yes.
But a monastery is Catholicism, isn't it?
Yes, Catholicism.
But they say chocoholic monks. Remember?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I do remember that.
Hello, Father.
Anyway, what happened? anyway, what happened was, as worldliness came into the church, the monks decided, and these men decided, that they had to remove themselves from that. The worldliness was coming into the church, so they took themselves out. Basically went out into the desert fathers. They denied themselves physical pleasures. They all wore a certain set of clothing. It was sort of like a John the Baptist revival. So where John's out in the desert and how was he dressed?
With a deer skin, I think.
Yeah, camel skin type.
Yeah, camel.
Rough clothing. What did he
eat? Honey and locusts.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's not a terrible diet if you coated the locusts with honey first.
So that's sort of what they did. They wanted to remove themselves. And so this led to a little bit of a work, the physical versus spiritual kind of influence that took place in these monasteries.
Yeah.
So what they actually did is they had something that was called in Latin, the ora, I'm going to mess this up, I'm going to butcher this, but it was Benedict of Nursia prescribed the ora et labora. That's pray and work.
Is that a bad prescription?
They treated manual labor as discipline. No, it's not necessary, but they're trying to balance
this.
Bad
prescription?
What?
Jardians.
Okay. You are exhausting me. Did I need to do all this as a notes from the pulpit?
Really swell, the little pill with the big story to tell.
We could have easily gotten through this. We only have one page left, right? So Benedict of Nursia, he's one of the monks in 480 to 547. He prescribes that Latin phrase that I butchered, the ora et labora, and that's pray and work. And so he's treating manual labor as a discipline. This is what the monks basically did. They did manual labor, but they were kind of doing it in a way to physically discipline their body. They weren't doing it in a proper way. Medieval societies kind of organized their work by station. So the clergy prays, the nobles ruled, and the peasants farmed. Do you know what a peasant is?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Idle peasant.
Exactly.
Another Wonka.
Exactly right.
He knows that, and he was raised in a ditch.
Raised in a what?
Ditch.
So this same medieval...
You gotta add the snort.
Okay, this same medieval time period, this gives rise to one of the great thinkers of Christianity, like him or hate him, was Thomas Aquinas. And so he integrates Aristotle. Side note, if you start reading about Christian nationalism, especially Stephen Wolf's book, you're going to see a lot of Thomas Aquinas references, but you can't read that without noting that Aquinas is influenced by Aristotle.
That sounded like you said you can't read thou.
I can read thou. You can't read thou without noting.
I can read thou shirt.
So Aquinas kind of affirms labor, but he ranks what's that word right there?
Contemplation.
Yeah, I don't know what I just did. Contemplation higher.
Why is you asking your son how to pronounce a word?
Because I wanted to bring you in.
Chows.
Instead of have you stare off into the distance.
Chows.
Yeah, chows or chaos. Francis of Assisi, during the same time period, he emphasizes poverty and humble work as spiritual witness. So guilds, did you know what a guild is? Let's see.
Gird, I know what a gird is.
No, is there movies that talk about guilds? The Lollipop Guild, of course, from The Wizard of Oz.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
Never seen that movie.
I'm not going to sing that song, but we represent the Lollipop Guild. So guilds...
represent the Lollipop Guild.
Guilds regulated trades. They enforced standards, and they gave labor a communal identity. So that's basically that medieval monastic time period. It's a very important time period where there was just confusion over work and labor, and it's still being influenced by Platonism at that point. This brings us up to one of the last periods we're going to talk about, and that is the Renaissance, Reformation, rediscovery of vocation. We talked about this in episode 4. And who was the one person that kind of rediscovered vocation? And vocation simply means a calling from God. Do you remember from episode 4?
That must have been one of the times that I didn't
His
hear.
name sounds like Lartin Luther. Any clue?
No clue. Oh, I know who it is.
Oh, who could it be?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes, Martin Luther. So Luther kind of rediscovers this doctrine of vocation, which, by the way, I've always assumed that church history runs linear from essentially the apostles up through the Reformation. That's not exactly true. If you pick up a book, it's called The Pilgrim Church. And
on the Pilgrim's Progress.
No, it's called The Pilgrim Church. and I am trying to think of the author of that right now, but he actually does a good job of pointing out there were pockets of Christians throughout all the world, throughout all different time periods that were not influenced by Catholicism.
I know who the author is.
What?
Martin Freeman.
No. So finishing up this Renaissance and Reformation period, you've kind of got a shift. So the work is affirmed as a calling. Luther says all labor is dignified before God. This is what we talked about in episode 4, where we were kind of saying that Luther held up the milkmaid and said, hey, that work is just as dignified as the preacher or the pastor or the priest, we might say. So all work is dignified. Calvin comes along and he's looking more along the lines of building on this and saying you got discipline, thrift, productivity, stewardship, which, by the way, Calvin, I learned this in one of my seminary courses.
Seminary.
Note for the record, I did not graduate with a degree, so I do not claim to have a seminary degree. But I did take a course in church history, and I did not know that Calvin influenced modern capitalism. So modern capitalism is kind of an outworking of Calvinist thought. He helped shape early capitalism. Labor becomes measurable, disciplined, and detached from the home and guild. So
how am I going to have people of my name? I mean, you've got Calvinist, that's easy, but Ezranist? That doesn't sound right.
You have a whole book in the Bible named after you, that you're named after. A prophet.
What? Oh,
a priest,
wow.
I should say. Priest, my bad.
I was nearly named Jeremiah.
So during this... No, you weren't. Not even close. So during this same time period, you've got Erasmus, you've got Luther. They're breaking down the sacred-secular divide, which Platonism had influenced up to this point. So Luther's kind of offering a correction to this, and Calvin builds upon this. They're kind of trying to restore this old Judaic view of work, where the spirit, the soul, and body are kind of recombined. All work is dignified. You don't have this separation. And so there's a book that I have not finished reading by Max Weber or Max Weber.
Max
Weber. That would be German. Max Weber would be Max Weber. Is that right? Max Weber.
Oh no, we got a German among us.
No, he wrote a book called basically Protestant Ethic.
Was that the guy who invented the nuclear bomb? Was he German or Russian?
German.
Okay.
Is that
Nazis
Oppenheimer?
were German too, right? Yeah, Oppenheimer. Also, for some reason, why do I have an excessive knowledge of nuclear? How it works?
Because you're reading your physics stuff, I guess.
Yeah. It's always interested me.
We're heading down the home stretch here. If you've hung in with us this long, in the midst of the co-host jokes,
probably up to about 9 or 10.
Up to about 9 or 10. But this brings us up to the Enlightenment period, early capitalism. This is pre-industrial.
I was enlightened of the whereabouts of my blanket.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't either. I just thought about a blanket and I thought about whereabouts. So
this is where you come up with thinkers that if you're reading American history, you're studying American history,
which we are going to soon.
You're going to come across names like John Locke and Adam Smith. There's
a chapter in Consequence of Ideas about that. First actual reference.
Mm-hmm. So they start tying property to labor. This is kind of a shift. John Locke likes to think that if you work a piece of land, if you modify or enhance a piece of land, that land automatically should become yours. So this is really where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it wasn't always called that. It was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. So that's a Lockean idea. Mm-hmm. Labor and property are tied together. Labor is understood in terms of ownership and market value, not so much as labor is valued and dignified because you've been created in the image of God. So during the same time period, you have Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so he's going to be one of the critics of the Lockean ideas, that inequality. He critiques this inequality as rooted in private property. So this leads to kind of socialist ideas. So rather than individual property ownership and labor being tied to that land, he wants to break that down essentially. And I do have one book on him. I read some about him when I was looking at the French Revolution. Interesting character. So during this Enlightenment period, you've got thought that increases. It increasingly detaches labor from a divine calling. It reframes it in terms of rights, productivity, and individualism. So just where you thought that the Reformation was going to kind of get things on the right path, the priesthood of believers, all work is dignified, things kind of being leveled across the playing field. There's no longer this sacred versus secular divide. There's no longer this clergy versus laity, and all of these camps are lining up against each other. And it kind of was flattening, although we could make an argument that Luther did not recognize this with the peasants that revolted against the church. That aside, everything that they did, everything that they worked for was kind of undone by the Enlightenment.
Another random mentioning, don't punch us, but we do have Windows 10.
Random? Well, you just firing off the randoms today, man. I can't keep up with them.
We'll have to make an unscripted part 2.
Okay, so coming out of this Enlightenment period, you've got a key point for us. This is going to be our second episode, which, by the way, may not include the co-host. What, man? What? That was for them, not you? I'm just joking. We will welcome you into the Industrial Revolution discussion and all of the randomness.
If you couldn't see, I'll say what I'm doing. Baby lip.
He's going to cry.
Crying lip.
He's going to cry. But anyway, all of these things, all of these time periods that we worked through just now,
Little Goblin Jr.
The reason why we brought them up was because of how much they have been influenced by Plato.
References to Spider-Man 3.
Exhausting. The Industrial Revolution. You got we're going to talk about this. I'll devote a whole episode to this, but this will kind of lead into it. So you got the mechanization process. Labor becomes commodified, which means it's a unit of time. This is terrible, and I hate this. Labor becomes a unit of time that's purchased by employers. In other words, we have allowed a value to be placed upon our time. Quick question for you, sir. How much do you think time is worth?
I think time is worth more than anything.
Would you be willing to put an infinite value on time?
No. Not as infinite as...
I would.
Infinite?
Time is invaluable. You cannot place a dollar amount on time. Do you know why? Because it's finite.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
So if I have
you can't infinitely price something that isn't the best thing in the world.
If I have a finite supply of something, that means it's going to run out quickly, and I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm going to create a inversely proportional value to that. So I have finite amount of time. It has an infinite amount of value on it. But what we did is we allowed, because of the Industrial Revolution, for that time to have a price tag. And you know what's really sad about that?
As you said price tag, I looked at a price tag.
You sure did. But you know what's sad about that? Is that we put price tags like minimum wage, or back in these days, maybe you put a dime or a nickel or 50 cents on your hour. And you said your hour is worth this amount. And then today we do the same thing, and we say your time, that hour of your life, is only worth this amount. And we sign a contract that says, yes, I agree to that. I think that's really, really sad, by the way.
You know what's also sad?
No?
I don't know.
Okay.
There are a lot of things that are sad.
I'm wrapping this up here. This is the last major period because it takes us to the Industrial Revolution, but alienation happens a lot here. I mentioned this. Please go back and listen to that Notes from the Pulpit, episode 3. Yeah, I'm a little intense. Yeah, I'm driving in my truck.
I wasn't there to interrupt.
Yeah, he wasn't there to interrupt, which means I was focused a little bit more. Okay, my bad. But anyway, what I want to point out there is that during that Industrial Revolution, that essentially husband and wife, man and woman, were ripped from their home, and even the kids were as well. So this labor transformation that happened during the Industrial Revolution essentially destroyed the family. And so it ripped them from their products, their tools, their families, their homes, their farms and shops, and put them in factories. And so as a result of the Industrial Revolution, you had a couple responses. Socialists and Marxists responded by attacking private property itself. They wanted collective ownership. And then you also had the rise of the social gospel that comes out of this, which was, I did not know. I've always read the social gospel and thought that, hey, where this just came out of liberalism, it actually didn't. It was a response to the Industrial Revolution and trying to point out that man had dignity apart from labor, but they went the wrong way about it. So we'll talk about this more when we get on that next podcast episode. Yeah. You got some key figures. We're going to finish this one up, but I'm not that familiar with David Ricardo or Robert Owen. So you may want to look those guys up. But Karl Marx is one of the key figures of this time period who critiques, quote, the alienation, exploitation, commodification of labor.
What? Can you give a simple definition of alienation? To exclude,
No.
right?
The alienation. Yeah. They were just pulled away from their families and homes and the farms, the things that they've been working and building.
I didn't know what you meant by that.
Everything that had been worked on over time, as far as like guilds and trades and working with your hands and farming and shepherding and those sorts of things, all along through history that we pointed out here with the Platonic influence, they were basically looked at as bad. Oh, you're just a dirty old dumb blue collar worker, like you said you met the other day.
Yeah, at Walmart. He was nice.
Yeah, did you call him a blue collar worker because he actually had a blue collar on, or?
No, he had a gray collar on.
Okay.
He had one, but it was close to a blue collar.
So the division that we'll get on this in this Industrial Revolution episode, but the divisions that we see today, they're still alive. The sacred versus secular, still alive and well. Priesthood versus laity, still alive and well as this blue-collar, white-collar division, and those who are supposedly smarter or brighter or better because they go to college versus those who work with their hands. All of these ideas and concepts can be traced through history, and you can see the Platonic influence, because as the church became influenced by Platonism, during these time periods leading up to the Reformation, the institutional church largely was responsible for what work looked like. And so you can't view work during that time apart from the institutional church, and you can't view the institutional church apart from the Platonic influence. So all of these things that we've talked about in this episode, they influence what work looks like today. And then we're going to get to those other three remaining factors, right? Industrial Revolution, compulsory schooling, and feminism. All of them have impacted work. So,
and
what else we got?
I've successfully talked over you the entire time, so you can't bleep me out anywhere.
Yeah, I hope you guys noticed that. I hope you appreciate the effort that I'm putting in here for you all. It's tough sledding sometimes. It's going to be real with you. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.